Hari Hari Bol. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for your beautiful kirtan. And thank you all for being here today. Today we're going to speak about the topic of how do I know whether I'm making spiritual advancement? You may have asked yourself this question and try to come to a conclusion on am I making spiritual progress or not? So this is today's topic. We're going to have a little discussion on this and read some verses from the Bhagavatam. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripadam Maham Vande Sri Guru Dinataranam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Ishwaram Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So, to ask oneself the question, am I making spiritual advancement, is a good question. And usually the mind is stuck in the loop of sankalpa vikalpa, which means I am doing great or I'm doing terrible. Has this ever happened to you? That either you're flying high or you're all depressed and on the bottom. So those are the two mental states usually, the two extremes. Now, the truth usually lies somewhere in between. So how do we know whether we're actually making spiritual advancement? Well, we can ask others. And some people will say, again, you're doing fantastic. And others will say, you're not doing very great. You're actually doing terrible. So you will see very quickly that it's really hard to get an objective opinion on your own spiritual advancement. But that's why we're very lucky, we're very happy that we have Shastra. Because Shastra is the yardstick, it is the way how we can measure our spiritual advancement. So today we're going to read from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, 2nd chapter, text number 117. Adi, 2nd chapter, 117. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jai Dvaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jai Dvaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jai Dvaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. This is a famous verse pretty much in the beginning of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where the characteristics and nature of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is described. Siddhanta Baliya Chittena Kara Alas Iha Haite Krishna Lage Sudrida Manash. A sincere student should not neglect the discussion of such conclusions, considering them controversial, for such discussions strengthen the mind. Thus one's mind becomes attached to Sri Krishna. What type of discussions? Discussions about Shastra. Purport: there are many students who, in spite of reading the Bhagavad Gita, misunderstand Krishna because of imperfect knowledge and conclude him to be an ordinary historical personality. This one must not do. One should be particularly careful to understand the truth about Krishna. If because of laziness one does not come to know Krishna conclusively, one will be misguided about the cult of devotion. Like those who declare themselves advanced devotees and imitate the transcendental symptoms sometimes observed in liberated souls. Like there is the example of a person who was seeing the transcendental qualities of Haridas Thakur, and he was imitating them. And some people, they bought it, they thought it's real, and other people became upset. So people don't really know who is who because they're looking according to external criteria. Although the use of thoughts and arguments is a most suitable process for inducing an uninitiated person to become a devotee, neophytes in devotional service must always alertly understand Krishna through the vision of the revealed scriptures, the bona fide devotees, and the spiritual master. Unless one hears about Sri Krishna from such authorities, one cannot make advancement in devotion to Sri Krishna. The revealed scriptures mention 9 means of attaining devotional service, of which the first and foremost is hearing from authority. The seed of devotion cannot sprout unless watered by the process of hearing and chanting. One should submissively receive the transcendental messages from spiritually advanced sources and chant the very same messages. Can one scroll down, please? For one's own benefit, as well as the benefit of one's audience. When Brahma described the situation of pure devotees freed from the culture of empiric philosophy and fruitive actions, he recommended the process of hearing from persons who are on the path of devotion, following in the footsteps of such liberated souls who are able to vibrate transcendental sound, can lead one to the highest stage of devotion, and thus one can become a Mahabhagavat. From the teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Sanatana Goswami, Madhya 2265, we learn, a person who is expert in understanding the conclusion of the real scriptures and who fully surrenders to the cause of the Lord is actually able to deliver others from the clutches of material existence. Srila Rupa Goswami in his Upadeshamrita advises that to make rapid advancement in the cult of devotional service, one should be very active and should persevere in executing the duties specified in the revealed scriptures and confirmed by the spiritual master. Accepting the path of liberated souls and the association of pure devotees enriches such activities. Imitation devotees who wish to advertise themselves as elevated Vaishnavas and who therefore imitate the previous acharyas but do not follow them in principle are condemned in the words of Srimad Bhagavatam 2.3.24 as stone-hearted. Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur has commented on their stone-hearted condition as follows: those who shed tears by practice but whose hearts have not changed are to be known as stone-hearted devotees of the lowest grade. Their imitation crying induced by artificial practice is always condemned. The desired change of heart referred to above is visible in the reluctance to do anything not congenial to the devotional way. To create such a change of heart, conclusive discussions about Sri Krishna and his potencies is absolutely necessary. False devotees may think that simply shedding tears will lead one to the transcendental plane, and even if one has not had a factual change in heart. But such a practice is useless if there is no transcendental realization. Whoever is scrolling, please stay with us. False devotees lacking the conclusion of transcendental knowledge think that artificially shedding tears will deliver them. Similarly, other false devotees think that studying books of the previous acharyas is unadvisable, like studying dry empiric philosophies. But Srila Jiva Goswami, following the previous acharyas, has inculcated the conclusions of the scriptures in the 6 theses called the Sat Sandarbhas. False devotees who have very little knowledge of such conclusions fail to achieve pure devotion for want of zeal in accepting the favorable directions for devotional service given by self. Hare Krishna, anybody home? See, realized devotees. Such false devotees are like impersonalists who also consider devotional service no better than ordinary fruitive actions. Yeah, so one person, he started imitating Haridas Thakur, and he was manifesting similar symptoms. So one person, I think it was a snake charmer, he just took a big stick and started beating him. And that person started screaming and yelling and got up and left and ran away. So Srila Prabhupada often said that if somebody is rolling on the ground and manifesting such types of symptoms in a temple, that somebody should just take a stick and beat him or kick him. And then it will see if the ecstasy is genuine, they will not even notice. And if the ecstasy is not genuine, the person will get up and run away. So can we have Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd canto, 3rd chapter, text 24, please? 2:3:24. So sometimes there's this argument that why should we discuss Shastra? Why should we discuss these points? Why we not just chant and be absorbed in the ecstasy of the holy name? It's because unless our mind and our intelligence becomes purified and becomes trained and focused, directed, attracted towards Krishna, the tendency in the neophyte state is to become a show bottle or an imitation devotee. Show bottle is an expression of a chemist or pharmaceutical stores who used to have these big bottles in their windows on display, but they were simply filled with water. That's a show bottle. There's nothing really substantial in it. It's just for show. So in a similar way, you will see there's a lot of people who dress in dhoti and kurta or sari, and they may even put on insignia of Vaishnavas, but if you examine the character and the behavior, then one can see that there is some room for improvement. And also in our own selves, if we introspect, we can also see that hopefully there is some room for improvement, because even advanced devotees never see themselves advanced, but they actually see themselves as the most undeserving, most fallen, and the most neophyte. They will never pose as mahants or as big teachers or gurus or great instructors of mankind. Now, Srila Prabhupada was often challenged because he sat on the Vyasasan and he took the role of the teacher, because as the Acharya, he had to make a point that he's representing Parampara. So when one has that weighty task of representing the institution, then there comes a certain amount of representation that comes with it. And that is done in a humble mood of service, not in a mood of showing off or trying to exploit others or to get benefits from it. So we're going to read the shloka tad ashma saram hridayam batedam yad griyamanair harinama deyai yad griyamanair harinama deyai navikriyeta tayada vikaro netre jalangatra ruhe shuharsha. Translation. Certainly that heart is steel framed, which in spite of one's chanting the holy name of the Lord with concentration, does not change when ecstasy takes place. Tears fill the eyes and the hairs stand on end. I am sure you have come across this verse and it has filled you with fear, because when I examine myself, I see that my hairs are not standing on end and I'm not in ecstasy. So is my heart steel framed? Am I a lost case? Am I making any spiritual advancement? I'm sure that these thoughts come across any practitioner who is trying to develop some sincerity and introspection. So let's see what Srila Prabhupada and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur have got to say on this Important verse. Purport. We should note with profit that in the first 3 chapters of the 2nd canto, a gradual process of development of devotional service is being presented. In the first chapter, the first step in devotional service for God consciousness by the process of hearing and chanting has been stressed, and a gross conception of the personality of Godhead in his universal form for the beginners is recommended. By such a gross conception of God through the material manifestations of his energy, one is enabled to spiritualize the mind and the senses and gradually concentrate the mind upon Lord Vishnu, the Supreme, who is present as a supersoul in every heart and everywhere, in every atom of the material universe. The system of Pancha Upasana, recommending 5 mental attitudes for the common man, is also enacted for this purpose, namely, gradual development, worship of the superior that may be in the form of fire, electricity, the sun, the mass of living beings, Lord Shiva, and at last, the impersonal supersoul, the partial representation of Lord Vishnu. They are all nicely described in the 2nd chapter, but in the 3rd chapter, further development is prescribed after one has actually reached the stage of Vishnu worship or pure devotional service. And a mature stage of Vishnu worship is suggested herein in relation to the change of heart. The whole process of spiritual culture is aimed at changing the heart of the living being in the matter of his eternal relation with the Supreme Lord as subordinate servant, which is his eternal constitutional position. So with the progress of devotional service, the reaction of change in the heart is exhibited by gradual detachment from the senses, from the sense of material enjoyment, by a false sense of lording it over the world, and an increase in the attitude of rendering loving service to the Lord. Vidhi Bhakti, or regulated devotional service by the limbs of the body, namely the eyes, the ears, the nose, the hands, and the legs, as already explained herein before, is now stressed herein in relation to the mind, which is the impetus for all activities of the limbs of the body. It is expected by all means that by discharging regulated devotional service, where are we? One must manifest the change of heart. If there is no such change, the heart must be considered steel-framed, for it is not melted even when there is chanting of the holy name of the Lord. We must always remember that hearing and chanting are the basic principles of discharging devotional duties. And if they are properly performed, there will follow the reactional ecstasy with signs of tears in the eyes and standing of the hairs on the body. These are natural consequences and are the preliminary symptoms of the bhava stage, which occurs before one reaches the perfectional stage of prema, love of Godhead. If the reaction does not take place even after continuous hearing and chanting the holy name of the Lord, it may be considered to be due to offenses only. That is the opinion of the Sandarbha. In the beginning of the chanting of the holy name of the Lord, if the devotee has not been very careful about evading the 10 kinds of offenses at the feet of the holy name, certainly the reaction of feelings of separation will not be visible by tears in the eyes and standing of the hair on end. The bhava stage is manifested by 8 transcendental symptoms, namely inertness, perspiration, standing of hairs on end, failing in the voice, trembling, paleness of the body, tears in the eyes, and finally trance. The Nectar Devotion, a summary study of Srila Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, explains those symptoms and vividly describes other transcendental developments, both in steady and accelerating manifestations. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has very critically discussed all these bhava displays in connection with some unscrupulous neophytes imitating the above symptoms for cheap appreciation. Not only Vishwanath Chakravarti, but also Srila Rupa Goswami treated them very critically. Sometimes all the above 8 symptoms of ecstasy are imitated by the mundane devotees, Prakrita Sahajiyas. But the pseudo symptoms are at once detected when one sees the pseudo devotee addicted to so many forbidden things. Even though decorated with the signs of a devotee, a person addicted to smoking, drinking, or illegitimate sex with women cannot have all the above mentioned ecstatic symptoms. But it is seen that sometimes these symptoms are willfully imitated, and for this reason, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti accuses the imitators of being stone-hearted men. They are sometimes even affected by the reflection of such transcendental symptoms. Yet if they still do not give up the forbidden habits, then they are hopeless cases for transcendental realization. Now, before we go on, Prabhupada oftentimes commented that there's many professional kirtan and bhajan groups and drama groups who will perform pastimes of Radha and Krishna, and they will sing bhajans and do kirtan in a very ecstatic and in a very elaborate manner, even feigning ecstasy, shedding tears, and putting out the whole thing. But then once the performance is over, they go backstage or to the side of the stage and they start smoking bidis. So it really shows that for them, it was just a performance. It was not really their heartfelt expression of how they feel about Radha and Krishna, nor is their realization about the philosophy or the practice of devotional service. It's simply a sequence that they have studied and learned, and they know how to rehearse it in public. We carry on with the purport. When Lord Chaitanya met Srila Ramananda Roy of Kavur on the bank of the Godavari, the Lord developed all these symptoms, but because of the presence of some non-devotee Brahmins who were attendants of the Roy, the Lord suppressed these symptoms. So sometimes they are not visible even in the body of the first-class devotee for certain circumstantial reasons. Therefore, real steady bhava is definitely displayed in the matter of cessation of material desires, kshanti, utilization of every moment in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, avyarta kalatvam, eagerness for glorifying the Lord constantly, nama gane sadaruchi, attraction for living in the land of the Lord, pritis tat vasatistale, complete detachment from material happiness, virakti, and pridelessness, mana shunyata. One who has developed all these transcendental qualities is really possessed of the bhava stage, as distinguished from the stone-hearted imitator or mundane devotee. So the story that is being given here is, you can leave it there. The story that's being given here is when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was encouraged to meet Ramananda Roy by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. When he met him on the bank of the Godavari in Kavur, the Roy, who was a government official, he was the governor of Madras and the southern provinces, he was surrounded by a lot of retinue, a lot of attendants, because a governor is never alone. He's got his secretaries, his chief of staff, his military, his servants. He's got a lot of people around him. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu naturally felt drawn to Ramananda Roy and attracted to him because he's his intimate devotee. Yet in the public assembly of all these people, he would suppress his symptoms of ecstasy, and he did not even come forward and interact with him, but he chose to meet him in a secluded place at night when they were alone and they could have an intimate type of a discussion. Srila Prabhupada also very rarely displayed ecstatic symptoms in public. It happened a few times while sitting on Vyasasan, while leading kirtan, or while giving class, that he went in ecstasy and tears were just gushing from his eyes and his voice faltered and he stopped speaking, or sometimes he said, just have kirtan. Sometimes he got up and left and went to his room. And one time he commented to one of his servants that, yeah, what happened today about the events, he said, yeah, but it doesn't happen very often. So he was very careful of not giving this wrong impression that if you're spiritually advanced, this is how you carry yourself in public. So Jiva Goswami has also given us 2 criteria how to recognize whether we're making spiritual advancement. And one is steadiness in devotional service, and the other one is mukhya prasada. It is sweet speech. So if you want to see whether you are making spiritual advancement, then introspect and see, am I steady in the performance of my devotional service? How is my sadhana? Am I getting up at a good time? And is it the same time every day? Or is it all over the place? Am I chanting my rounds before I do anything else? Am I reading Prabhupada's books every day for an hour at least? What is the quality of my devotional service? So this steadiness is one symptom. And mukhya prasada, or sweet speech, what is the quality of my talk? How do I interact with others? Am I slipping into slang, or even worse? Am I argumentative? Am I resentful? Am I challenging and shouting and screaming at people? Or am I actually having a sweet speech? So here, the qualities that are being given, and we're going to focus on them a little bit just to get into it. They are very interesting. That the first thing that happens, and these are all the symptoms that actually show that a person has attained bhava, or that they have attained real sincere emotion in their devotional service. So the first is cessation of material desires. This also comes up in the other verse of the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhakti Pareshanubhavo Viraktir Anyatrascha Chaisha Trika Ekakala Pratyabhyamasnyatyachanta Shus Tushti Pushti Kshut Apayanugasam. So the first thing is cessation of material desires. One becomes detached from material desires. So that's a fairly easy task to see. Am I still contemplating and planning and scheming and even executing plans for fulfilling my material ambitions? So kshanti, cessation of material desires. Then avyarta kalatvam. Have I stopped wasting my time? Am I using every moment for the service of Krishna? Or am I procrastinating? Like, it's very easy to justify and to just become lackadaisical and think, oh, it's okay, let the mind loose, let it go slack. It's not required to always keep focused on Krishna. But an art is that you can always hear, you can always chant, you can always be absorbed in Krishna consciousness, even when you're exercising, even when you go for a walk, even when you're having so-called casual association with other devotees. And an advanced devotee is careful to make sure that not a moment of time is wasted. And as soon as things are getting in a direction where it's not beneficial, then it will bring it back to center and make sure that Krishna is there. It's about Krishna is part, not just a side factor, but Krishna is the main factor, and it is about Krishna. So utilizing every moment in transcendent loving service of the Lord. Nana Shastra Vicharanai Kanipunav Sadharma Samstapakao Lokanamita Karune Tribhuvane Manya Sharanya Karao. So the Goswamis, they were so busy in Krishna's service, they forgot to sleep, they forgot to eat. They did these things just in a very minor way on the side, just to keep their physical bodies alive. But they were so absorbed in their devotional service to Krishna that they simply did not find much time to engage in these activities. And just as a matter of formality, they maintained their bodies. So, avyarta kalatvam, then eagerness for glorifying the Lord constantly. Nama gane sadaruchi. Do I have taste to engage in Harinam Sankirtan? Am I a minimalist? Do I just chant my rounds somehow and somehow I complete? Or do I try to do more? And we all have seen that when we try to do a little more, Krishna immediately is responsive. Whether you just add a couple of rounds, or you chant 25 rounds, or you try to do 32, or you chant a special number on Ekadasi, then you'll immediately see how the level of absorption and focus and reciprocation intensifies. So to be eager to glorify the Lord also means that we want to speak about Krishna in our conversations. We want to hear and read about Krishna. We want to discuss about Krishna with others. And we want to glorify Krishna's pastimes and activities and his holy name in every situation of life. So we will make time and make it our priority to engage in propagating the holy name of the Lord through the Sankirtan movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because this is the Yuga Dharma. So to be eager for that is a very good qualification. There's another beautiful verse in the Bhagavatam that we just came across and studied a few days ago that says that our desires that we have of our senses and mind are like a flowing river. It seems like they're unstoppable. But if you have ever seen a river that enters the sea, the ocean, and then when there is high tide, the water level of the ocean rises and it actually floods the river, and it just completely floods it and pushes back even the waves that are coming from the river. I don't know if you have seen, but it's a very amazing phenomena. So in a similar way, it is said that the desires of the senses and the mind are relentless. As long as we have a material body and a mind, these desires are going to be there, and they're going to be flowing towards the sea. They're going to be there, and they're going to try to connect with their sense objects. But if we engage in the devotional service of Krishna, then the tide of that ocean, of the nectar of devotion, will flood our senses and mind, and will completely transform and spiritualize our senses and mind. So it's a beautiful analogy, and it's something to keep in mind. You can meditate upon this and see how you can achieve that state to actually flood your senses and mind with the devotional service of Krishna. And then you will experience how not only the pushings, the vegans, the drive that is there on the material level will cease, but how you can actually reverse it and turn it into a current that goes in the opposite direction, that you're using the energy and the vigor that is there in our sensual and mental prowess. And by engaging it in Krishna's service, Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehina rasovarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. By engaging the senses in the master of the senses service, we purify them and we achieve that higher taste. And we actually become satisfied, happy, and peaceful. Tushti, pushti, kshut, and apayanugasam. Just like a person who's eating, taste, satisfaction, and absence of hunger are natural concomitant bifactors. Just like if you water the root of a tree, the leaves, branches, and fruits and flowers will get automatically nourished. So in a similar way, when you engage in devotional service, then you become detached from matter and you become satisfied and happy in the performance of your devotional service. So this is part of the Sankirtan process. And I will later on speak a little bit more on that, but there is one or two more topics that I would like to cover before that. So then there's attraction for living in the land of the Lord. We may not be able to go to the Dham, but we can always meditate on the Dham and perform our bhajan in a spirit of being in the Dham. Then complete detachment from material happiness, virakti. We're not trying to enjoy in this world. And pridelessness, manashunyata. We're not showing off, not flaunting our accolades or our qualities, but we're actually prideless. We're humble. We have true humility. So these are the transcendental qualities by a person who actually is on the Bhava platform. We like to finish the purport. The whole process can be summarized as follows. The advanced devotee who chants the holy name of the Lord in a perfectly offenseless manner and is friendly to everyone can actually relish the transcendental taste of glorifying the Lord. And the result of such realization is reflected in the cessation of all material desires, etc., as mentioned above. The neophytes, due to their being in the lower stage of devotional service, are invariably envious, so much so that they invent their own ways and means of devotional regulations without following the acharyas. As such, even if they make a show of constantly chanting the holy name of the Lord, they cannot relish the transcendental taste of the holy name. Therefore, the show of tears in the eyes, trembling, perspiration, unconsciousness, etc., is condemned. They can, however, get in touch with a pure devotee of the Lord and rectify their bad habits. Otherwise, they shall continue to be stone-hearted and unfit for any treatment. A complete progressive march on the return path home back to Godhead will depend on the instructions of the revealed scriptures directed by a realized devotee. So Daruka, Krishna's servant and driver, one time he was fanning Krishna and he became so blissful and so ecstatic that he almost fainted, and the peacock fan almost slipped from his hand. So forcefully he suppressed the ecstasy to be able to continue his service. So in a similar way, when you feel that ecstasy is welling up in you and the situation does not call for it, either you're in a public setting or you're doing a service that really requires full focus and attention, then push it down. Just offer it again into the service of Krishna. It's natural that ecstasy, that happiness arises in the performance of devotional service. But we can either just try to milk it and try to enjoy it, and then usually it disappears, or we can just offer it back to Krishna and say, hey, this is very nice. I like to offer it to you. And in this way, you always offer it back to Krishna. You always offer it back to Krishna. And in this way, it becomes more and more and more and more. It keeps increasing, but it gets deeper and deeper and sweeter. It becomes very thick. But a devotee is mainly concerned with continuing his or her service to please Krishna. So on the topic of glorifying Krishna, this Sankirtan process of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I just like to share one or two stories, and then we have some room for questions. I was just in New York a couple of days ago, and we had Harinam in Washington Square Park with the devotees from Bhakti Center and devotees from Radha Govinda Mandir, who are also out every day. And as we were setting up the table in the Harinam, one of the very first persons, Michael, he walked up to me and he said that he's trying to meditate and he's just having a real hard time. So you will meet many sincere people out there who are actually looking for a way forward, how to get into a authentic spiritual practice. So we had a little discussion on how to actually do that. And I selected a few books for him, which he very happily took and reciprocated. So I found it interesting because whenever we make that step out into the great unknown and we take that leap of faith to go out into the world and put ourselves out there and say, yes, this is who we are and this is what we do. Immediately, people come out of the woodwork and say, where have you been? I've been looking for this. This is fantastic. Can I have this? So it's an amazing experience. So please try it out. Glorify Krishna in public by chanting Hare Krishna, doing Harinam, sharing Prabhupada's books, sharing prasadam. Yesterday, I went to the public pool in Gainesville with Brahmatirtha Prabhu, and he was wearing a black t-shirt that said, I love Kirtan, and I did a drum on it. And there was one elderly lady, and she looked at his t-shirt and she asked him, what is Kirtan? So he said, it's mantra meditation, we do chanting, Hare Krishna. And it turns out that she was faculty at the University of Florida, and she ate Krishna lunch for many, many years. And she said that her whole department was totally out of balance. People were a bit wacky, she said. But whenever she felt she needed some grounding, she would walk down to Krishna lunch and eat prasadam and hear the kirtan. So she was very appreciative. And at the end, she also went swimming. So she turned to us and she said, your message is being heard and it's being appreciated. So she just, sometimes people say these very succinct things that are like sutras, and it just hits you. Another experience I had in New York, we were at Columbus Circle, which is the entrance of Central Park. And it already got cold, but the sun was still out. So there was a lady, elderly lady, mid-80s, in a wheelchair with a caretaker. And in the sun, they just parked the wheelchairs there in the sun, and they're there for some time, and then they go on a walk and take them back home. So I walked up to the lady, and she had very beautifully manicured fingernails, a lot of rings with jewelry, and nicely done hair and makeup. But she was 85 years old. So I went there and I presented the Bhagavad Gita to her. So she really paid attention and she was very receptive. She asked the caretaker to give her her purse. She handed me $5. And at the end, she said something really beautiful that I wanted to share with you today. She said, thank you for taking the trouble and effort to come over and talk to me. And she didn't say the second part, but the second part would have been, nobody talks to old people in wheelchairs. So thank you for making the effort and coming and talking to me. And I was just reflecting that this lady a few decades ago must have been a very beautiful lady. But now, through the effect of jara, of time, she just turned into this person here on the wheelchair. But the jivatma, the soul, is still the same person and is still waiting for when will somebody come and talk to me about something that's meaningful, that's actually giving me relief from my situation, from my material predicament. So these are just some points that I wanted to share with you. And we have some time, about 15 minutes, for questions and answers. I'm happy to see some familiar faces here. And I hope you're all well and blissful in your devotional service. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Navina Nirada Prabhu, Dandat Pranam, Jai Prabhupada. Thank you
Hare
so much.
Krishna.
Thank you so much for the fantastic choice, actually, of the topic. and it was nice to hear about the characteristics of highly advanced devotees. And one of the things that I heard you say was that about Mukhe Prasada, that always nice words should come out from our mouth. So sometimes while you're managing a project, you have to have a stern demeanor, and so how do we handle that? Like the voice has to be strict, and the words have to come
Is
out
it a
and say
devotional project or is it in your job?
devotional project.
Okay. Well, thank you for your honesty. There's an austerity in every service, So Gaur Mohan, Srila Prabhupada's father, used to tell him, okay, I don't want to do this, but I'm your dad and I have to chastise you now. So he made kind of a disclaimer, and then he gave him the straight talk. But Prabhupada always said that my mother was very strict and my father was very lenient. So in every project, it's good to have the good cop, bad cop, or you may have to fulfill both roles. Because if you only do one type of thing, you're only sweetness or you're only strict, then people either get spoiled or they run away, and because you're too fierce. So there has to be balance there. And we can see it in Srila Prabhupada, that sometimes he was very strict and very stern, but for the most part, he was very kind and very accommodating and loving. But then he also expected people to actually pick up their game and improve their service. So also one has to see, what is my audience? Who am I dealing with? Is this a newcomer? Is this a youngster? Is this an elderly person? Is there some extenuating circumstances? Or is it really a big deal? Or could it be done in different ways? Maybe this person has got some better ideas, some better ways of how to do things. It's not, hey, I'm the boss. You got to do it the way I say so. Why? Because remember rule number 1, the boss is always right. Huh? So we also have to be a little bit flexible to adjust and to see what is the situation, who is my audience, and how do I communicate my message. And so if we have inspirational sadhana, Krishna in our heart will actually tell us how to deal with people adequately. And he will give us instant feedback. So I talked with Bhakti Prabhu, which is Brahmatirtha Prabhu's wife, yesterday. And the last point that she gave me on my way that I wanted to share with you is that formerly, I don't know how many of you remember, but telephones used to have that receiver on the top.
Yes.
And the big thing where you dial.
Yes.
So if the receiver is not properly on the phone, then the phone won't ring.
Yes.
So you got to make sure that your receiver is actually on the phone. Otherwise, even though Krishna wants to tell you things, you won't be able to hear them. And one time I made this observation with some of my friends and God brothers. And I said, many of you are great orators. You're great in speaking. You're fabulous in preaching. But very few of you are good listeners. So as a leader, we have to really, and this is the criteria of our success and our advancement as leaders, how much am I able to listen and to take on feedback and suggestions from my team and implement them, and in this way improve the service? Because there's always different ways of how things can be done. So these are just some reflections. I don't know if it helps, but the mind usually gets into the paradigm of either I'm doing fantastic or I'm doing terrible. And usually it's somewhere in between. So don't be too hard on yourself and don't be too hard on others as well. And be open for hearing Krishna's guidance and see how we can do this thankless task of taking care of others and help them in the performance of their devotional service. And we should know that hopefully some of that sukriti, some of that benefit will come on us, or Krishna and Guru will think favorably of us for doing that. Because it's a great austerity. It's a great austerity to try to help others in the performance of their devotional service. So thanks you and all of you for taking on that thankless task of trying to help others in their devotional service. I
Yeah,
hope.
thank you so much. Yeah, no, this was very helpful. Actually, key takeaway points for me are how you pointed out to inspirational sadhana and how it then later on it'll come from within your heart. Krishna will help you, and also how you have taken Mukhe Prasada to the other extreme end of the spectrum, where you're saying that don't say anything, and some not saying anything is actually Mukhe Prasada. nothing else came out of the mouth. That's also good. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, sometimes it's just not the situation, or it's not required, or it would be counterproductive. And it's important to know when to speak and when to be silent, or when to speak strongly. And there has to be some, it's like in music, there has to be some highs and lows. If it all just goes mid-range, it just becomes very flat, and people either get bored and fade out, or they just becomes not really audible or attractive. Thank you, Shraddha.
Thank you.
Other questions or reflections, comments?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
This is Tadi Sevdas. So I have a reflection I would like to share regarding the slave of the senses. From my own experience, I'm trying to share this. Before coming to devotional service, I used to be a slave of my senses. Trying to satisfy my senses in all possible ways, thinking that sense gratification will give me happiness for sure. Definitely, I'll be happy from sense gratification. So, ever since I went to the college, I was watching myself closely, carefully. Am I really be happy in sense gratification? But unfortunately, I was never happy. I was year after year, I could see myself, I engaged in sense gratification for almost 4 years. And then there was absolutely no happiness. There is only dissatisfaction at the end, even after,
Come on, don't be too hard on yourself. At least a few drops were there, right? Saying there's no real happiness.
So yeah, there is absolutely no happiness. And when devotees introduced me to this philosophy, they said, you have to control your senses. You have to lead an austere life. You have to get up for Mangalarti. You have to chant 16 rounds. You have to eat only prasadam. And then these things, then I used to say, man, this is crazy. It is very difficult. This process is very difficult. But after so many years and years of practicing a little bit, I can see that there is a freedom, in Krishna consciousness. You are no longer a slave of your senses, and you can experience that freedom. That happiness comes from the freedom, from your own senses. The senses are not controlling you. The happiness comes from the freedom from the senses, because we are. Am I thinking in the right direction, Prabhu?
Yes, you are. Thank you for sharing your heartfelt realizations and for your honesty. It is much appreciated. And one point that I wanted to add is also that if we are still feeling stone-hearted and there's no change of heart, we're not really able to change our ways, even though we have made so many external arrangements. We have to understand that we're most likely committing many offenses. Otherwise, there would be some change of heart and there would be some actual traction, some actual result. So it's like one has to go after these mistakes and see, where am I losing water, and plug the holes, like just make sure you cover your bases. That's why we repeat these, offenses every morning, so that we can safeguard against them. And we know inattentiveness is the root cause of all offenses. So too many devices cause vices, If you have too many devices, then the vices are easily increasing. So make sure you get a break from your devices and from your vices. And in this way, you can actually focus on devotional service. So we spoke about that the change of heart is showing a detachment from material enjoyment and not in exhibiting external symptoms. It's not about how much ecstasy and how much tears and or even in external things like dress and other types of insignia, but it's really a matter of these qualities that we just read in this verse. And you can read up on that and take notes and really get into it. This is why Prabhupada very meticulously went through all these purports of the acharyas and extracted the essential points and incorporated them into his purports. So you really have the quintessence, the distilled essence of the Vedic wisdom in Prabhupada's purports. That's why we study Prabhupada's books, and that's why we distribute Prabhupada's books. Because they're spot on. And it is important that we put ourselves into that mindset and into that frequency so that we actually keep a very clear focus on what is the goal, and we do not sway for a moment in any way, shape, or form. We have time for one more question. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Such a wonderful and enlightening class. So yeah, very nicely you pointed out this 5 or 6 thing like Shanti, Abhyartha Kalatyam. So all those things, detachment from material happiness, etc. So it seemed like if we, it's like if we do good chanting, then this happens. And if we try for these things, we can chant good. So either way, we endeavor for both as well as good chanting. But seems like the proper chanting is the key to naturally manifest these qualities. So my question to you is, so because chanting is so important, would you please give some suggestions, tips, points, how to chant better, how to chant good rounds? What are the things we need to do?
Well, to do japa seminar in 2 minutes is a challenge. But if chanting becomes like breathing, it becomes not something extraneous or something external, but it actually becomes a necessity. It actually becomes your life breath. Then you will chant at all times, in all circumstances. You will always keep the holy name on your tongue. Whether you got your beads in your hand or you're doing whatever it is that you have to do for your service or for your work, but the holy name will always accompany you. And for me, when I feel most connected is usually when I try to help others to come closer to Krishna, because that's when I feel I'm getting some bonus, I'm getting some special mercy from Guru and Krishna. Because to do it mechanically sometimes is a struggle. It's hard. But when you have that special mercy that comes, you just naturally get drawn and you get attracted. So rather than try to work on the negatives, on what to avoid, work on the positive, on what attracts you, and just follow your heart. You are a natural devotee and you have taste. So follow your heart and follow your your devotional inclination, which will draw you naturally to the service of Radha and Krishna. Now, I'm saying this to you and not to, like a newcomer who would just start out on the process. Initially, you tell people, okay, you do like this, like this, like this, and don't do like this, like this, like this. But ultimately, attraction is stronger than repulsion. So remember the analogy of the ocean. So the senses are rushing towards their objects, and there's no way stopping the waves of the river unless the tide floods the river and just pushes it back and floods the entire area, gets flooded in that way. So let us take shelter of the holy name of Krishna wholeheartedly, and let us pray for the mercy of the Vaishnavas and the spiritual masters. And in this way, by their blessings, we can acquire a taste, a molecule, a fraction. Prasada leshanu grihita evahi janasya tattvam bhagavan mahimno nachanya ekopi chiran vichinyvan. We can achieve a fraction, just a slithering of taste. Well, we're not praying for taste, we're praying for service, because in service, everything is included. It's a package deal. So the more we actually focus on our service, the more we'll see how naturally our taste for hearing and chanting will increase, because we see that it's a prerequisite. I can't do proper service if my hearing and chanting is not in line, if I'm not really solid in my sadhana, in my bhajan. It will really compromise the quality of my service. And we have all witnessed that. So praying for service and not rejecting when service comes, like whatever it might be. Somebody may give you a hint. Somebody may ask you for something. You may see a need. Krishna tells you, respond to it. I went on a walk, and as I was halfway out there on the road already, I realized I didn't take any books with me. And I felt really stupid because I'm breaking the law, and that's just not a good thing to do. So I walked back to the place where I stay, and I picked up a stack of small books. And then I went on my walk, and I met an entire crew of workers who were doing construction. And they took all my books. And just after they took the books, they took off, they left. So if I hadn't gone back and responded to that call, like Krishna tells you, hey, clean up your mess. This is not good. Get your act together. Then you can just go through life and just ignore all these signs till we hit the brick wall. And we feel like there's dryness. I have a stone heart. I'm not really feeling anything. And I'm still so engrossed in so many unbeneficial activities. So thank you for bringing this up. Chanting is the most important activity, and it will enable us to perform all our other services in a more Krishna conscious manner. So thank you all for your association and for being here.
Thank you, Navina
I
Nirada
hope
Prabhu.
you're all well in your seva and bhajan, and looking forward to see you sometime soon, Krishna willing. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to assembled devotees. Thank you all for joining in online, and for our kirtaniyas who could not make it, but who are with us in spirit. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Grantarat Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, 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 Hare